It was late, the stars were bright, and the moon was full and shining down on a great green forest. There was a great tree in the heart of the woods, and in this tree, a beautiful and mysterious fairy made her home. Her wings were as soft and beautiful as a butterfly's, and she had long, flowing hair. She was a kind fairy, but she was very lonely and longed for someone to talk to. The fairy had a good friend, a little squirrel who lived in the tree next to her home. She loved this squirrel and cared for him like he was her own child. The squirrel was very intelligent, and he understood everything the fairy said to him. He loved the fairy too, and he was always happy to do what she asked of him.
"Tonight,"
said the fairy, "we are going to go on an adventure. The moon is shining brightly, and the stars are out in all their glory. I think it is time for us to go into the forest and see what we can find." The little squirrel was very excited by this idea and jumped up and down with joy. The fairy smiled and put a hand gently on the squirrel's head. "I am glad you are excited," she said, "but remember, the forest can be a dangerous place at night. We must be careful and stick together." The fairy and the squirrel set off into the forest, their hearts full of hope and excitement. They walked for a long time, the fairy's wings shimmering in the moonlight, the squirrel's tiny feet padding softly on the forest floor. At last, they came to a clearing in the woods. In the center of the clearing was a beautiful, sparkling pool of water. The fairy and the squirrel approached the pool slowly, marveling at its beauty. The water was so clear that they could see their reflections staring back at them, and the fairy could not help but smile at the sight of her beautiful wings. The pool was surrounded by soft, green grass, and colorful flowers bloomed all around it. "This is a magical pool," said the fairy in a soft voice. "It is said that if you make a wish here, it will come true. I have been saving a wish for a very long time. I think this is the perfect moment to use it." The squirrel looked at the fairy with wide eyes. He had heard of the magical pool before, but he had never seen it himself. He was amazed by its beauty and magic. He watched as the fairy closed her eyes, a look of concentration on her face. After a moment, she opened her eyes again and smiled. "There," she said, "I have made my wish. Now all we have to do is wait." They sat down on the soft grass, the fairy and the squirrel, and they waited. They did not have to wait long, for soon a beautiful swan appeared from the trees. It was a magnificent creature with pure white feathers and a long, graceful neck. It approached the pool slowly, and as it did, it began to sing. The fairy and the swan listened to the beautiful music, mesmerized by its beauty. They sat there, the fairy with her eyes closed, the swan with its head tilted back, and they listened to the song. It was like nothing they had ever heard before, so pure and magical that it seemed to capture the very essence of the forest. When the song was over, the fairy opened her eyes and looked at the swan. "Thank you," she said softly. "That was the most beautiful song I have ever heard. I am so glad that I made my wish." The swan bowed its head gracefully and then turned and walked back into the trees. The fairy watched it go, a smile on her face. The squirrel looked up at her with wide, wondering eyes. "Did your wish come true?" he asked. The fairy nodded. "Yes," she said. "My wish has come true, and I am happier than I have ever been before. I am no longer lonely, for I have you, my dear friend, and I have the beautiful song of the swan to remember always." The squirrel smiled and rubbed his head against the fairy's hand. He was happy that she was no longer lonely and that her wish had come true. He knew that the fairy loved him and he loved her, and he was content in the knowledge that they would always be together. The fairy and the squirrel walked back to their homes, their hearts full of joy and contentment. The fairy returned to her tree, and the squirrel scampered up to his cozy little nest. They both drifted off to sleep, dreaming of the magical pool and the beautiful swan's song. They knew that they would always treasure the memory of this special night, and they looked forward to many more adventures together in the magical forest they called home. The next morning, the fairy woke up feeling refreshed and happy. She stretched her wings and flew out of her tree, looking for her little squirrel friend. She found him playing in the branches of his tree, chasing a butterfly and laughing with joy. "Good morning, my dear," said the fairy. "Did you sleep well?" The squirrel stopped playing and ran to the fairy, rubbing his head against her hand. "I slept very well," he said, "and I had the most wonderful dream. I dreamt of the magical pool and the swan's beautiful song. It was so real that I felt as though I was really there." The fairy smiled. "I had the same dream," she said. "It was a wonderful adventure, wasn't it? I am so glad that we got to experience it together." The squirrel nodded enthusiastically. He loved going on adventures with the fairy, and he was always excited to see what they would find. "What shall we do today?" he asked. The fairy thought for a moment. "I think today would be a good day to explore the forest," she said. "We can climb to the top of the trees and see how far we can see. We might even spot some other magical creatures." The squirrel's eyes grew wide with excitement. He loved exploring the forest, and he couldn't wait to see what they might find. He nodded eagerly, and the fairy smiled. "Then let us go," she said, and with that, they set off on their adventure. They climbed up into the trees, the fairy flying effortlessly, the squirrel scampering from branch to branch. They climbed higher and higher until they reached the top of the tallest tree in the forest. From there, they could see for miles and miles. They could see the sparkling pool where they had seen the swan the night before. And they could see the sun shining down on the forest, making everything look green and beautiful. The fairy and the squirrel sat on the top of the tree, taking in the breathtaking view. They could see birds flying through the air, and they could hear the sound of a gentle stream burbling in the distance. It was peaceful and serene, and the fairy felt grateful to be able to experience such beauty. As they sat there, they noticed something strange in the distance. There was a flash of light, and then a beautiful rainbow appeared in the sky. The fairy gasped in amazement, and the squirrel's eyes grew wide with wonder. They had never seen anything like it before. "What is that?" asked the squirrel. "It is a rainbow," said the fairy. "It is a beautiful natural phenomenon that occurs when the sun shines through the raindrops in the air. But this rainbow is different from any I have ever seen before. It is so vivid and colorful that it seems almost magical." The squirrel looked at the rainbow in awe. He had never seen such beautiful colors before, and he couldn't believe that something so magnificent could exist in the world. He sat and stared at it, mesmerized by its beauty. The fairy smiled at the squirrel's reaction. She was glad that he was able to experience something so magical, and she was happy to be able to share it with him. She reached out and gently stroked the squirrel's head, and he looked up at her with shining eyes. "It's beautiful," he said softly. The fairy nodded. "It is," she agreed, "and the best part is, There is said to be a pot of gold at the end of every rainbow. Would you like to go and find it?" The squirrel's eyes lit up with excitement. "Yes, please," he said eagerly. The fairy smiled. She knew that it would be a fun adventure for the both of them, and she was excited to see what they might find. "Then let us go on a quest to find the pot of gold," she said, and the squirrel cheered with excitement. They set off towards the rainbow, following it through the trees. As they got closer, the colors became even more vivid and beautiful. The fairy and the squirrel marveled at the sight, amazed by the magic of the natural world. As they walked, the rainbow led them deeper and deeper into the forest. They had never been this far before, and everything seemed new and exciting. They saw strange plants and animals, and they heard the sound of running water up ahead. At last, they came to the end of the rainbow. There, nestled among the roots of an ancient tree, was a small pot filled with glittering gold coins. The fairy and the squirrel gasped in amazement and delight. "We found it," exclaimed the squirrel. "We actually found the pot of gold." The fairy smiled and nodded. "We did," she said, "and it is even more beautiful than I imagined." The squirrel reached out and touched one of the gold coins. It was smooth and heavy, and it glittered in the sunlight. He had never seen anything so valuable before, and he couldn't believe that they had actually found it. The fairy looked at the pot of gold and then back at the squirrel. "What would you like to do with it?" she asked. The squirrel thought for a moment. He knew that the gold could buy him many wonderful things, but as he looked at the fairy, he realized that he didn't need any of that. He had everything he needed right here in the forest with his dear friend. "I think we should leave it here," he said finally. "It is too beautiful to take away from the forest. Besides, I don't need gold to be happy. I have you, and that is all the treasure I need." The fairy's eyes filled with tears at the squirrel's words. She was so touched by his kindness and his appreciation for their friendship. She reached out and hugged him tightly, feeling grateful for the precious gift of his companionship. "You are a very special squirrel," she said softly, "and I am the lucky one to have you as my friend." The squirrel hugged her back, feeling happy and content. He knew that he and the fairy would always treasure the memory of their magical adventure and the pot of gold they had found. And as they made their way back through the forest, they both knew that their friendship was the greatest treasure of all. As they approached their home, they saw a figure sitting by the base of the fairy's tree. It was an old, wise-looking owl with big, round glasses perched on the end of his beak. He looked up as they approached and smiled. "Ah, there you are," he said in a deep, rumbling voice. "I have been waiting for you. My name is Professor Hootenanny, and I am here to teach you all about the magic of the forest." The fairy and the squirrel looked at each other in confusion. They had never heard of Professor Hootenanny before, and they weren't sure what to make of him. "Who are you?" asked the fairy. "I am a wise old owl," said Professor Hootenanny, "and I am here to teach you everything I know about the magic of this forest. I have been watching you from afar, and I am very impressed with your kindness and bravery. I think you have the potential to be great fairy and squirrel, and I would like to help you realize that potential." The fairy thought about this for a moment. She had always known that there was magic in the forest, but she had never really understood it. She would love to learn more about it and how to use it to help others. "What kind of things would you teach us?" she asked. Professor Hootenanny smiled. "I can teach you how to make flowers bloom with just a touch of your hand," he said. I can teach you how to communicate with all of the creatures of forest, from the tiniest insect to the largest mammal. I can even teach you how to fly faster and farther than you ever thought possible." The fairy's eyes grew wide with excitement, and she looked down at the squirrel. He was watching Professor Hootenanny with interest, and she could tell that he was just as excited about the prospect of learning magic as she was. "That sounds wonderful," she said. "We would be honored to be your students." Professor Hootenanny beamed with pleasure. "Excellent," he said. "Then let us begin your first lesson." And with that, the fairy and the squirrel began their journey to learn the magic of the forest. They learned how to make flowers bloom and how to talk to all of the creatures of the woods. They learned how to fly and how to appreciate the beauty and wonder of the world around them. And through it all, they remained the best of friends, always there to support and encourage each other. The fairy lived in a cozy little house in a tall tree. The house was made of twigs, leaves, and soft moss, and it had a lovely view of the forest. The fairy loved her home, and she spent many happy hours there, tending to her garden and watching the animals play in the branches below. One day, the fairy decided to have a garden party. She invited all of her friends from the forest, and she spent hours preparing for the big event. She made delicious fairy cakes and brewed a special fairy punch. She decorated her garden with beautiful flowers and lanterns, and she even made a special fairy tonight. Said the fairy to the little squirrel, "We are going on a magical adventure. The moon is full, the stars are shining, and there is magic in the air. Come with me, and we will explore the wonders of the enchanted forest." The squirrel was thrilled. He loved going on adventures, and he especially loved going on them with the fairy. She was kind and beautiful, and she always made him feel safe and loved. He scampered up the tree to where the fairy was waiting, and together they flew off into the night. They soared through the moonlight, their laughter echoing through the trees. They chased after fireflies and danced on the soft green grass. After a while, they came to a beautiful meadow filled with wildflowers. The fairy landed softly on a patch of clover, and the squirrel hopped down beside her. They looked around in wonder at the beauty that surrounded them. "This is amazing," said the squirrel. The fairy nodded. She was just as impressed as the squirrel, and she couldn't believe that she had never seen this meadow before. It was filled with all sorts of colorful flowers, and in the center, there was a beautiful pond that reflected the light of the moon. They walked through the meadow, taking in the sights and sounds. They came across all sorts of creatures, from rabbits and deer to birds and butterflies. Fairy spoke to each of them, using her magical powers to communicate. The squirrel watched in amazement as she conversed with the animals, learning all about their lives and their habitats. As they made their way through the meadow, the fairy suddenly stopped. She cocked her head to the side, listening intently. The squirrel looked at her curiously, wondering what she had heard. "Do you hear that?" she asked softly. The squirrel listened closely, and after a moment he heard it too. It was music, soft and beautiful, like nothing he had ever heard before. It seemed to be coming from a nearby hill, and without a word, the fairy took off towards it. The squirrel followed close behind, eager to see what was making such lovely music. When they reached the top of the hill, they saw a magnificent castle made of crystal. It sparkled and shone in the moonlight, and from within, they could hear the sound of beautiful music. The fairy and the squirrel approached the castle slowly, awestruck by its beauty. As they got closer, they saw that the castle was surrounded by a moat. But this was no ordinary moat, for it was filled with beautiful, shimmering fairies. They flew back and forth, their wings catching the light of the moon and sending shafts of glittering color through the air. The fairy and the squirrel stopped at the edge of the moat, unsure of what to do next. But as they watched, a beautiful fairy appeared from within the castle. She had long, flowing hair the color of honey, and her dress was made of the finest gossamer. She smiled at the fairy and the squirrel and beckoned them forward. "Welcome," she said in a voice like tinkling bells. "I have been expecting you. My name is Princess Lily, and this is my home. I would like to invite you inside so that we can talk." The fairy was amazed. She had never seen such a beautiful castle before, and she had certainly never met a princess. She looked at the squirrel and he nodded eagerly. Together, they followed Princess Lily into the castle. Inside, the castle was just as beautiful as the outside. The walls were made of crystal, and they sparkled, shone in the light of the lanterns that lined the halls. Princess Lily led them to a beautiful throne room, where a magnificent throne was carved out of a single piece of crystal. Princess Lily sat down on the throne and motioned for the fairy and the squirrel to sit on a nearby bench. They did as they were told, looking around in wonder at the beauty. "That do you remember how I told you that I had a very special wish that I was saving?" asked the fairy. "Well, this is it. I have been waiting for the perfect moment to use my wish, and now is the time. I wish for the ability to help all of the other fairies in the forest communicate with humans." The squirrel looked at the fairy in confusion. "But you can already talk to humans," he said. Fairy shook her head. "No, I can't," she said. "My magic only allows me to speak to animals. I have always wished that I could talk to humans as well, so that I could help them appreciate the beauty and wonder of nature." The squirrel thought about this for a moment, and then he smiled. "That's a wonderful wish," he said. "You are so kind and selfless. I am sure that your wish will be granted." The fairy blushed at the squirrel's praise. She didn't feel kind and selfless. She just wanted to help others. But she was glad that the squirrel approved of her wish, and she hoped that it would be granted. She closed her eyes and concentrated hard, focusing all of her energy on her wish. As she did so, she felt a strange sensation, like a warmth that was spreading through her body. It grew and grew until she felt as though she were glowing. Suddenly, she heard a voice. It was soft and musical, and it seemed to be coming from all around her. "Your wish is granted," it said. The fairy opened her eyes and looked at the squirrel. He was staring at her in amazement, his mouth hanging open. "You're glowing," he said. The fairy looked down at herself and saw that he was right. She was surrounded by a soft golden glow that pulsed and shimmered in the light. She couldn't believe it. Her wish had been granted, and now she had the power to communicate with humans. She was so excited that she threw her arms around the squirrel and hugged him tightly. He hugged her back, happy for his dear friend and all that she could now do to help others. From that day on, the fairy used her newfound powers to help the humans who lived in the village. She showed them the beauty and wonder of the forest and taught them how to live in harmony with nature, and she and the squirrel remained the best of friends, going on many more magical adventures together and exploring the wonders of their enchanted world. It was the fairy and the squirrel's favorite time of year again, the season of changing leaves. Every year, the trees would change from their usual green to brilliant shades of orange, red, and yellow, creating a magical landscape that the fairy and the squirrel loved to explore. They decided to embark on an adventure through the forest to see the changing leaves up close. The fairy packed a basket with some of her favorite fairy cakes, and the squirrel scampered alongside her, his bushy tail twitching with excitement. As they made their way deeper into the woods, the fairy marveled at the colors around her. The trees stood tall, their branches heavy with leaves of every hue imaginable. She flitted from branch to branch, touching each leaf gently and watching as they drifted lazily to the ground. Squirrels scampered up and down the trees, collecting the fallen leaves and making a pile at the base of a giant oak. "Look," he cried to the fairy, "I'm making a leaf nest." The fairy laughed and flew down to join him. Together, they arranged the leaves into a cozy little nest, perfect for a squirrel of his size. The squirrel climbed inside and curled up, looking delighted. I could stay here forever, he sighed happily. The fairy smiled and sat down beside the nest. It is beautiful here, she agreed, but there is still so much to see. Would you like to continue our adventure? The squirrel's eyes grew wide, and he nodded eagerly. Then let's go, said the fairy, and they set off once again. They walked for a while until they came across a clearing. In the center of the clearing stood an enormous tree, its branches reaching up towards the sky like giant arms. The leaves on this tree were the most beautiful of all, shimmering with hues of gold and crimson that seemed almost otherworldly. Wow, breathed the fairy, this tree is incredible. The squirrel nodded, his eyes wide with wonder. I've never seen anything like it, he said as they approached the tree. They heard a soft rustling sound. Suddenly, a shower of leaves rained down upon them, tickling their skin and filling the air with a sweet, earthy scent. The fairy and the squirrel laughed and twirled in the rain of leaves, feeling carefree and joyful. When the leaves finally settled, they noticed something strange at the base of the tree. It was a small door, cleverly hidden in the trunk. Look, cried the squirrel, a door. The fairy's curiosity was piqued, and she flew down to examine the door more closely. It was small, no bigger than a fairy, and it looked as though it had not been opened in a long time. She grasped the tiny handle and pulled, but the door would not budge. It's locked, she said, frowning. The squirrel scampered down to join her. Maybe I can help, he said. He placed his tiny paws on the door and pushed with all his might, but still it would not open. Just as they were about to give up, they heard a faint click and the door swung open. Inside was a cozy little room lit by a soft golden light. The room was filled with books and strange objects that the fairy did not recognize. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was an old man with a long white beard and twinkling blue eyes. He smiled at the fairy and the squirrel, his face creasing with wrinkles. Welcome, my dear fairy and squirrel, he said in a warm, raspy voice. Please come in. The fairy and the squirrel exchanged a nervous glance, but their curiosity got the better of them. They stepped inside the room, and the old man closed the door behind them. My name is Professor Evergreen, said the old man, and this is my home. I am a guardian of the forest and a keeper of its secrets. The fairy's eyes widened with amazement. She had never heard of such a thing before. A guardian of the forest, she repeated. Professor Evergreen nodded. Yes, my dear. It is my job to protect the forest and all of its inhabitants. And you, my dear fairy, are a very important part of that. The fairy felt a surge of pride at the old man's words. She had always known that she was meant for something special, and now she was beginning to understand what that something was. I have been watching you, said Professor Evergreen, his eyes twinkling, and I am very impressed. You have a good heart and a strong spirit. I think you would make an excellent apprentice. The fairy's mouth fell open in shock. An apprentice to the guardian of the forest. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. But I'm just a fairy, she said. Professor Evergreen chuckled. Ah, my dear, you are much more than just a fairy. You have the power to make a real difference in this world, and I would like to teach you how. The fairy looked at the squirrel, who was watching her with wide, excited eyes. She knew that this was an opportunity she could not pass up. I accept, she said finally. Professor Evergreen beamed with delight. Excellent, he cried. Then let us begin your training at once. And with that, the fairy began her journey to become a true guardian of the forest. She learned all about the delicate balance of nature and the importance of preserving it. She discovered her own hidden strengths and abilities, and she learned how to use her powers to help those in need. The squirrel remained her faithful companion throughout it all, and together they went on to have many more magical adventures. They explored the depths of the forest, discovering hidden wonders and marvels at every turn. And they lived happily ever after, surrounded by the beauty and magic of the natural world. The fairy and the little gray squirrel loved to explore the woods together. They would flit and scamper through the trees, discovering new wonders at every turn. They were the best of friends and always had each other's backs, no matter what adventure they found themselves on. One day, as they were out on a walk, they stumbled upon a hidden path they had never seen before. The path was winding and narrow, disappearing into the thick foliage of the forest. Without a word, the fairy and the squirrel decided to follow it, eager to see where it would lead. As they made their way down the path, the trees seemed to grow taller, and the air thickened with an otherworldly energy. The fairy could feel the magic in the forest pulsing around her, and she quickened her pace, excitement bubbling up inside her. The squirrel scampered along beside her, his little heart beating rapidly with anticipation. Suddenly, the path opened up into a clearing, and there, in the center of the clearing, stood an enormous tree, unlike any they had ever seen before. Its trunk was wide and gnarled, its branches reaching up towards the canopy like giant arms. But what truly caught their attention was the door carved into the trunk of the tree. The fairy gasped in wonder, hovering in the air before the magnificent tree. "A tree house," she exclaimed, her voice trembling with delight. The squirrel's eyes grew wide as he scampered up to the door. He reached for the brass knob and turned it, but the door didn't budge. He tried again, pulling with all his might, but it still wouldn't open. "Let me help you," said the fairy gently. She flew down and placed her hand on the knob. As soon as she touched it, the door swung open easily, revealing a set of stairs that curved up into the darkness of the tree. "Magic," breathed the fairy. The squirrel nodded, his whiskers twitching with excitement. "Shall we go inside?" The fairy grinned mischievously. "Why not?" And with that, they stepped into the treehouse, the door creaking shut behind them. The stairs were steep and winding, disappearing up into the shadows. The fairy led the way, her wings glowing softly in the dim light. The squirrel followed closely behind, his paws making soft pattering sounds on the wooden steps. As they climbed higher and higher, the stairs began to narrow. The fairy had to flatten herself against the wall to keep from getting stuck, and the squirrel had to squeeze through sideways. But they didn't let that stop them. They were determined to reach the top of the tree and discover what wonders it held. Finally, they emerged into a room filled with soft, golden light. The walls were lined with shelves overflowing with strange and wondrous objects. There were glowing crystals, shimmering fabrics, and odd devices that whirred and clicked softly to themselves. In the center of the room stood a beautiful wooden desk, carved with intricate patterns of leaves and vines. Behind the desk sat a kindly-looking old man with a long white beard that reached down to his waist. His piercing blue eyes twinkled with warmth as he looked up at the fairy and the squirrel. "Welcome, my dear fairy," he said in a rich, melodious voice. "And welcome, little squirrel. I have been expecting you." The fairy's wings fluttered with excitement. "Expecting us," she repeated. The old man nodded, a gentle smile playing on his lips. Yes, my dear, I am the keeper of the woods, and I have been watching you for some time now. I must say I am very impressed. The squirrel's ears perked up with interest. The keeper of the woods, he squeaked. That is correct, said the old man. It is my duty to protect and preserve the magic of the forest. And I sense that you, my dear fairy, have an important role to play in that mission. The fairy's heart swelled with pride and purpose. She had always known that she had a special destiny, and now it seemed that destiny was revealing itself to her. What can I do to help? She asked eagerly. The keeper of the woods smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. I'm glad you asked, he said. You see, there is a great darkness threatening our forest. A terrible sorcerer has cast a spell over the land, draining the magic from the trees and the creatures. I need your help to break that spell and restore the forest to its former glory. The fairy's determination burned bright within her. She was ready for whatever challenge lay ahead. I won't let you down, she said firmly. The keeper of the woods chuckled, clearly amused by her spirit. I have no doubt that you will rise to the challenge, he said. But first, you must prepare yourself. The journey will be difficult, and you will need all your strength and cunning to succeed. He reached into one of the drawers of his desk and pulled out a small, delicate necklace. It was made of twigs and berries, strung together on a strand of silken spider's web. The fairy gasped as he held it out to her, mesmerized by its beauty. This is a necklace of protection, explained the keeper of the wood. It will shield you from harm and guide you on your journey, but you must accept it of your own free will. The fairy didn't hesitate. She reached out and took the necklace, feeling its warmth and magic pulsing through her. As soon as she put it on, she felt a surge of power and confidence flow through her. Thank you, she said gratefully. The keeper of the woods nodded, a look of approval on his face. You are most welcome, my dear. Now, let us begin your training. And with that, the fairy's adventure truly began. Under the guidance of the keeper of the woods, she learned how to harness her magic and use it for the good of the forest. She discovered hidden strengths and abilities she never knew she had, and she prepared herself for the great battle against the dark sorcerer. The squirrel remained by her side throughout it all, a constant source of comfort and support. Together, they faced many challenges and obstacles, but they always emerged victorious, their bond growing stronger with each trial. As the days turned into weeks, the fairy grew into a powerful and wise young fairy, ready to face whatever dangers lay ahead. And when the time finally came for her to confront the dark sorcerer, she was prepared, with the necklace of protection around her neck and the squirrel by her side. She set out to save the forest and fulfill her destiny. She was no longer just a simple fairy in the woods. She was a hero, and nothing would ever be the same again. The fairy was beyond excited. Today was the day she would meet the other fairies of the forest and show them the magical amulet she had received from the keeper of the woods. She had spent hours getting ready, making sure every detail of her appearance was perfect. Her wings sparkled with dewdrops, and her hair was adorned with delicate flowers. She felt like the most beautiful fairy in the entire forest. As she approached the meeting place, a clearing deep in the woods, she could hear the chatter of the other fairies. There were at least a dozen of them, all flitting about and talking excitedly. They all fell silent as the fairy approached, their eyes widening as they took in her radiant appearance. The fairy felt a surge of confidence at their reaction. She hovered in the air before them, her wings fluttering gently. "Hello," she said, smiling brightly. "My name is Lily, and I am new to this forest. I hope we can all be friends." The other fairies looked at each other nervously, clearly unsure of what to make of this newcomer. One of them, a fairy with bright pink hair, stepped forward. "I am Rose," she said, "and these are the fairies of our forest. We don't often get newcomers here." Lily's smile faltered slightly, but she quickly recovered. "I see," she said. "Well, I hope I can prove myself worthy of your friendship." Rose looked her up and down, a hint of curiosity in her eyes. "Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?" she said. Lily's confidence returned in full force. She loved talking about herself, and she saw this as the perfect opportunity to impress the other fairies with her magical abilities. "Well," she began, "I am a very powerful fairy. Just the other day, I helped a lost squirrel find its way home by using my magic to communicate with it." The other fairies exchanged skeptical glances. Lily could tell they didn't believe her, but she was determined to prove herself. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the magical amulet, holding it up for all to see. "And I received this amulet from the keeper of the woods himself," she said proudly. There was a collective gasp from the other fairies, and Lily felt a surge of satisfaction. She had them now. She was the most powerful fairy in the forest, and they couldn't deny it. But as she looked closer at their faces, she realized that their expressions were not ones of awe and admiration. They looked confused, even a little scared. "I don't think you should have that," said Rose, her voice trembling slightly. Lily's brow furrowed in confusion. "What do you mean?" she asked. "The keeper of the woods gave it to me. It's mine." Rose shook her head. "That amulet is not meant for fairies," she said. "It's too powerful. You could hurt yourself or others if you're not careful." Lily felt a stab of fear at Rose's words. Could it be true? Was the amulet too powerful for her to handle? She looked down at it in her hand, and as she did, she felt a strange tingling sensation in her fingers. It was as if the amulet was alive, reacting to her touch. Suddenly, Lily was unsure of herself. She had been so excited to show off her new possession. But now she was beginning to wonder if she had made a terrible mistake. I don't know what to do," she stuttered, feeling tears prick at the corners of her eyes. Rose's expression softened, and she flew closer to Lily. "It's okay," she said gently. "We can help you, but you need to give us the amulet. It's not safe for you to have it." Lily hesitated, torn between her desire to keep the amulet and her fear of its power. But as she looked into Rose's kind eyes, she knew what she had to do. She slowly held out the amulet, and Rose carefully took it from her. "Thank you," said Rose. "We'll take this to the keeper of the woods and make sure it's safe." Lily nodded, feeling a wave of relief wash over her. She had learned a valuable lesson about the dangers of seeking power and attention. From now on, she would be more careful, more humble. She would strive to be a good fairy, one who truly deserved the respect and admiration of the others. And as she watched Rose and the other fairies fly away with the amulet, Lily felt a sense of hope for her future in the forest. She knew she still had a lot to learn, but she was ready for the challenge. She was ready to become the fairy she was meant to be. The fairy was in her little house in the flower one day, feeling rather bored. She had done all her chores and had nothing else to do, so she decided to go for a walk. She flitted from flower to flower, enjoying the warm sun on her wings. and the sweet scent of the blossoms. As she flew over a patch of soft green grass, she noticed a tiny gray squirrel lying on the ground. He looked very strange, and the fairy could tell that something was wrong. She landed next to him and saw that his fur was dull and matted, and he had a dazed look in his eyes. "Hello, little squirrel," she said softly. "What is wrong? Are you sick?" The squirrel slowly opened his eyes and looked up at the fairy. "I don't feel well," he said in a weak voice. "I'm dizzy and everything looks blurry." The fairy's heart went out to the poor little creature. She gently stroked his fur with her hand, trying to soothe him. "Don't worry," she said. "I will help you feel better." The squirrel smiled weakly. "Thank you," he said. The fairy thought for a moment, trying to figure out what to do. She didn't know much about squirrel medicine, but she remembered that her mother had once told her that fairies have healing powers. She decided to try and use her magic to help the squirrel. She placed her hands on the squirrel's forehead and closed her eyes, concentrating hard. She could feel a warm, tingling sensation in her hands, and she knew that her magic was working. Slowly but surely, the squirrel's eyes cleared and he sat up, looking much better. "Wow," he said, his voice full of wonder. "I feel great now. Thank you so much." The fairy smiled happily. "You're welcome," she said, "but you should be careful. Whatever made you sick might still be around." The squirrel nodded. "I will," he said. "My name is Squeaky, by the way." "What's yours?" "I'm Lily," said the fairy. Squeaky's eyes lit up. "It's nice to meet you, Lily," he said. "I've never met a fairy before. You're amazing." Lily blushed at the compliment. "It was nothing, really," she said. "I'm just glad I could help." Squeaky looked at her curiously. "So, what brings you out here today?" he asked. Lily shrugged. "I was just out for a walk," she said. "I didn't have anything else to do." Squeaky's face lit up with excitement. "Hey, I know," he said. "Why don't you come with me? I know a great place where we can have some fun." Lily thought about it for a moment. She had never really hung out with a squirrel before, but Squeaky seemed nice, and she didn't have anything else to do. "Okay," she said finally, "lead the way." Squeaky let out a squeak of delight and scampered off, with Lily following close behind. They made their way through the forest, chatting happily as they went. Lily was having a great time and couldn't wait to see where Squeaky was taking her. After a while, they came to a clearing in the woods. In the center of the clearing was a massive oak tree, its branches stretching up high into the sky. Squeaky scampered up the tree trunk and disappeared into a knothole. Lily followed him, using her magic to float up into the air. She found herself in a cozy little room, lined with soft leaves and twigs. Squeaky was busy rummaging through a pile of acorns in the corner. He turned to Lily with a big smile on his face. "Welcome to my house," he said proudly. Lily looked around in amazement. She had never seen a squirrel's house before, and she was impressed by how cozy and comfortable it was. "It's beautiful," she said. Squeaky beamed with pride. "Thank you," he said. "I built it myself." Lily couldn't believe it. "You built this all by yourself?" she asked. Squeaky nodded. "Yep," he said. "I'm very good at building things. I made all the furniture too." Lily looked around again, this time noticing the little chairs and table made out of twigs and leaves. "Wow," she said, "you're very talented." Squeaky blushed at the compliment. "Thanks," he said. "Hey, do you want to play a game?" Lily smiled. She loved playing games. "Sure," she said. "What did you have in mind?" Squeaky thought for a moment. How about hide and seek? He said. You can be at first. Lily agreed, and Squeaky hurried off to hide. Lily closed her eyes and started counting. When she reached 100, she went off to find her new friend. She searched high and low, but couldn't find him. The fairy had been feeling lonely lately. She missed her family and friends back in her home forest, and longed for the warmth and familiarity of her old life. Living in a new forest, surrounded by unfamiliar faces and strange customs, had left her feeling isolated and homesick. She tried to make the best of it, of course. She explored every corner of her new home, marveling at the towering trees and sparkling streams. She made friends with the other fairies and creatures of the forest, learning their names and stories. But despite her efforts, she couldn't shake the feeling of emptiness inside her. One day, as she sat by the edge of a quiet pond, she saw her reflection staring back at her. Her wings looked dull and lifeless, and her eyes were rimmed with dark circles. She sighed deeply, wondering how she could feel so lost in such a beautiful place. Just then, a soft voice called out to her, "Hello there, little fairy, are you okay?" The fairy turned to see a wise old owl perched on a nearby branch. His big, round eyes looked at her with kindness and understanding. "I'm fine," the fairy said, trying to sound cheerful. "Just a little homesick, that's all." The owl nodded sympathetically. "I know how you feel," he said. "It can be hard to adjust to a new place, but remember, home is where the heart is, and your heart is here now." The fairy smiled weakly. "I suppose you're right," she said. But as she turned back to the pond, she couldn't help but feel a pang of sadness. She wished she could go back to her old forest, if only for a day. The owl seemed to sense her thoughts. "Tell you what," he said, "why don't you take a little trip back to your old home? It might help you feel better." The fairy's eyes widened in surprise. "Really?" she asked. "You think that would be okay?" The owl chuckled. "Of course it would," he said. "Sometimes taking a step back is the best way to move forward. Besides, I'm sure your family and friends would love to see you." The fairy couldn't believe what she was hearing. She had been longing to return home for so long, and now she had the perfect opportunity. "Thank you so much," she exclaimed, throwing her arms around the owl's neck. The owl laughed, his feathers ruffling slightly. "You're very welcome," he said. "Now, shall we get started on our journey?" The fairy nodded eagerly, feeling a surge of excitement wash over her. With the owl by her side, she felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Together, they set off on their adventure, bound for the fairy's old forest and the home she loved so dearly. The fairy and the squirrel were sitting on a branch of a large oak tree. The fairy had been telling the squirrel the story of her life, and the squirrel listened with rapt attention. When the fairy had finished, the squirrel sat in silence for a long time. Then he said, "You have had a remarkable life." The fairy shrugged. "I don't know about that. It's just been my life. I mean it," said the squirrel. "You've seen and experienced so many amazing things. I can hardly imagine what it must have been like to live in a city or to fly to the moon." The fairy laughed. "It was certainly different from anything I could have imagined," she said. "But you know, I think I prefer living in the forest. There's something about being surrounded by nature that feels right to me." "I know exactly what you mean," said the squirrel. "I've lived in these woods my whole life, and I couldn't imagine living anywhere else. Although," he added with a grin, "sometimes I think it would be nice to have a house of my own, like you do." The fairy smiled. "Well, maybe someday you will," she said. She looked around at the trees, appreciating their beauty. "I'm glad we met," she said. "You've been a good friend to me." The squirrel's eyes shone with happiness. "I'm glad too," he said. "I've never really had a friend like you before." The fairy reached out and stroked the squirrel's soft fur. "I think we make a good team," she said. The squirrel nodded enthusiastically. "Definitely," he agreed. "Hey, why don't we go on an adventure together? Just you and me?" The fairy's heart leapt at the idea. She had always loved going on adventures, and she knew that exploring the forest with the squirrel would be a fun and exciting experience. "That sounds like a wonderful idea," she said. "Where should we go?" The squirrel thought for a moment. "How about we explore the part of the forest that neither of us has seen before?" he suggested. The fairy grinned. "Perfect," she said. "Let's do it." And with that, the fairy and the squirrel set off on their new adventure, ready to face whatever lay ahead and to enjoy each other's company along the way. The fairy and the owl arrived at the fairy's old home just as the sun was rising. The fairy's heart swelled with emotion as she saw the familiar trees and flowers of her childhood. She hadn't realized how much she had missed this place until now. The owl landed on a branch outside her old house, and the fairy flew up to join him. She took a deep breath, savoring the sweet scent of the blooming flowers, and then knocked gently on the door. After a moment, the door opened and the fairy's mother stood there, looking as beautiful as ever. Her eyes widened in shock when she saw her daughter standing before her. "Lily," she gasped, "is that really you?" The fairy smiled and nodded. "It's me, Mom," she said. "I've come home." Her mother let out a cry of joy and pulled the fairy into a tight embrace. The fairy felt tears of happiness prick at the corners of her eyes as she hugged her mother back. "I've missed you so much," her mother said, stroking the fairy's hair. "I was so worried about you. Where have you been all this time?" The fairy pulled back and looked at her mother. "I've been on an incredible journey," she said. "I met a talking tree who sent me on a quest to find the keeper of the woods. I had so many amazing adventures along the way, and I made some wonderful friends." Her mother's eyes were wide with wonder. "That sounds incredible," she said. "I'm so proud of you for being so brave." The fairy blushed. "It wasn't always easy," she admitted, "but it was worth it, and now I'm back home where I belong." Her mother smiled and hugged her again. "Welcome home, my dear," she said. "We've all missed you terribly." The fairy felt a sense of peace wash over her. She knew that she still had a lot to learn and experience. But for now, she was exactly where she was meant to be. She was home, surrounded by the people and the forest she loved. "Thank you, Mom," she said, smiling brightly. "I'm home at last." The fairy woke up to the sound of birds. The fairy woke up to the soft chirping of birds outside her window. She stretched her wings and yawned, feeling refreshed and rejuvenated after a good night's sleep. As she sat up in bed, she noticed a beautiful bouquet of flowers sitting on her nightstand. The fairy gasped in delight, recognizing the flowers as her favorites. She got out of bed and walked over to the nightstand, picking up the bouquet and inhaling its sweet fragrance. A small note was attached to the stems, and the fairy read it with a smile. "Good morning, beautiful." The note said, "I hope you're having a wonderful morning. I just wanted to let you know how much you mean to me. You are the light of my life, and I am so lucky to have you by my side. I love you more than words can express." The fairy's heart melted as she read the note. She knew exactly who had left the flowers and the sweet message. It was her beloved the handsome fairy who had captured her heart. She couldn't wait to see him and thank him for the thoughtful gesture. The fairy quickly got dressed and flew out of her house, heading towards her beloved's home. As she approached, she could see him sitting on a tree branch, waiting for her. The fairy's heart skipped a beat as she saw him. He was even more handsome than she remembered, with his shimmering blue wings and sparkling green eyes. She flew up to him and gave him a big hug. "Thank you for the beautiful flowers," she said, beaming at him. "You always know how to make me smile." Her beloved smiled back, his eyes filled with love and adoration. "You deserve only the best," he said, "and I am the luckiest fairy in the world to have you as my girlfriend." The fairy blushed at his compliments, feeling happy and content. She knew that their love was strong and true, and she couldn't wait to spend the rest of her life with him. As they sat together on the tree branch, watching the sunrise and holding hands, the fairy knew that this was just the beginning of their happily ever after, and she couldn't wait to see what the future held for them.